Hey guys, and welcome back to another video. So, this was originally going to be a Q&A, but I think this is just going to be a discussion based on one particularly interesting question that I got, especially given the, I think, general sentiment of the last few days. And that question is, why do you continue playing? Now, to answer this, I am going to, yes, talk about 6.0, 6.1, and Warlords of Draenor, but also talk about the past expansions and the things that really drove me to play back then. Because I think a really good way of analysing content is to think of, well, what actually made me play in the past? And is that something that's catered to me now? And essentially that. Though, of course, you do need to bear in mind different circumstances and things like that when you look at past content, and obviously the effect of, rose-tinted goggles, spectacles, glasses, eyewear, whatever. Obviously, sometimes the past does look better, even though in reality it may not have been. Now, because this is a particularly interesting question, I would implore you to leave your own answers to it. Why do you continue playing? Especially now, and also, what was the stuff in past expansions that drove you to play more? I think that would be pretty interesting to read, and I definitely will be reading the contents of this video. Also, if you've got a general question for the Q&A, leave it there too. I'm kind of running low on them. Anyway, time to talk about why I play Warlords of Draenor. I'm going to start off with what, and then we'll go into the past. So, right now, the reason why I play is to raid. I've got a wonderful guild full of really cool people, and I think the raiding content of Warlords of Draenor is excellent. Therefore, I'm having a lot of fun in Blackrock Foundry, I had a lot of fun in High Mall, and that's essentially what's going on. I'm also, really trying to put in an effort to perform well in my class, and that's, I think, something that just drives me a lot, honestly. Now, in terms of the other aspects of Warlords of Draenor, well, I can tell you one thing, garrisons do not make me continue playing because, as I've said many times since the beta, the garrison follower missions are boring. It's just a Facebook-like deferred loot collection system where, really, once you've maybe played the game for a week or two, you've got your followers maxed, then all you do is you walk up to the mission board, you click on a few things, collect your free loot. I don't think that's interesting gameplay, and the reason why I think it did keep a lot of people strong on for so long is because, well, you're thinking to yourself, it's so little effort to log in and click on that table, and I will get stuff, so I think I'll do it anyway. But now it's at the stage where I just really struggle to care. It's not like I enjoyed doing that really ever, it's more that it was just compelling because of the reward reason, which, I mean, yeah, it's good to have content that's compelling because of the rewards, but you need to be compelled to do something that's fun because it's fun, and because of the rewards, not just because of the rewards. So that's a little bit of an issue. As for the garrison buildings, well, you get them all up to level 3 pretty quickly, honestly, and I mean, I don't really do much with the buildings now because I don't think there's a great deal to do. I've definitely got to get a stable, though, and do that, because that is a pretty hefty chunk of content, though I'm still a little bit bummed out about the animations of those Warlords of Draenor mounts. I think they're really weird. I mean, some of them are too fast, some of them are too slow, some of them are super stiff. I don't know, it just feels like they didn't spend a lot of time and effort modeling some of those, like, Talbuk and Water Beast mounts. A little bit shifty, but that's definitely something to do. Now, in terms of other Warlords of Draenor things, the whole Apexis system is just boring as pants, let's be honest. There's nothing cool there. And the Apexis dailies are, I mean, right. As a bit of content that one goes out and does, I think they are less fun than most of the dailies or anything like that Blizzard have put into the game in the past. The reason why I think they're a lot more palatable to more people is because, unlike the arguably sometimes more interesting dailies that we had in patch 5.0, is that you don't feel compelled to do them because of the rewards behind them. Patch 5.0, it put a lot of important things like epic crafting recipes behind reps, so people felt like they had to do them. And I think, yeah, maybe the gameplay of those reps was more fun for the first 10 times, but, I mean, if you compare those, like, to what we're doing with these garrison Apexis dailies, the Apexis dailies are boring as pants. You're just grinding mobs. I mean, come on, could you get more unoriginal than that? In fact, one of the major, I think, innovations that WoW had when it came out was it had a questing system and not a grinding system, and it's just weird that we've kind of regressed. And I do think it's a regression. I think that well-designed quests with a well-designed story and things like that can be done well, assuming rewards are handled right. So with the Apexis stuff, it's nice that it doesn't feel mandatory, but the content is just not fun. So that does not make me continue playing. Also, reputations in Warlords of Draenor are I mean, come on, they're a load of pants. They're not that good, are they? like a grind is, again, lazy, boring, very lazy and very boring. Did I say that enough? Look, I know that a lot of people like being able to grind out a rep in that way. That's awesome. And I think what Blizzard should do is support that gameplay while providing other stuff. Some people like dailies, some people like a bit of a story to go on. A few of the reputations and myths actually had some cool story quests that unlocked from time to time. For an example, the Golden Lotus. Why could we not have some stuff like that tied into reputations where you could get cool story quests? So even if you were the kind of player who enjoyed grinding, you could still do that. You could still grind it out via killing mobs, but maybe you get a cool quest now and then that's got a bit of story. You know, that's not taking away from the reps we have right now in Warlords, it's just adding stuff. And I think it was a pretty lazy implementation. Also, there's less reputations than there was in the past, which is a little bit odd. And I think, honestly, it was one of those systems where it was getting late in the beta, and they just knew they didn't have time to do it justice, so they kind of shoved that in, essentially. A bit unfortunate. So it's funny, I mean, looking back at patch 6.0, what really kept me playing was, A, just gearing up my character and doing all that content, the leveling, of course, and then raiding, and that's basically it. Now, the leveling has actually given me quite a bit of longevity, because I think I've got 5 90s, and not 90s, I've got 5 100s and 1 99, so obviously I've been leveling quite a bit, and I think that has been quite fun. You know, the leveling's been great, the dungeons have been great, the raids have been great. I just feel like a lot of the kind of daily, well, daily's the wrong word, the sort of day-to-day content that isn't your big raid is pretty weak this time round. But for me, it sort of works. I've got a pretty busy schedule, so raiding suits me fine. That's not to say that I wouldn't like more stuff, though. I would rather be in the situation where there's just so much awesome stuff in the game that I don't have time to do it, because more good stuff is always a good thing, right? Well, at least it's pretty much always a good thing. Now, in terms of, like, personal, life and the amount of free time that I have, it's kind of non-existent between it being third year of university and there being loads of projects for that. Well, more just one very, very, very big project, which is kind of scary. And then also doing YouTube, which takes a lot of time. Trust me, see those lore videos? They take many, 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 many hours to get going. Currently working on a troll one. It took about, I think it was 3 and a bit hours to get it written and researched. No, yeah, it was about 4 hours when you count the research in. Then it was 4 hours just getting the background footage. I haven't got all of that yet. I still need to record the thing, and I still need to edit it. So, I mean, time's just a bit of an issue. So, right now, just raiding suits me fine, but I'd like more content. And I mean, 6.1 is not really going to make me do anything extra on a day-to-day basis. It essentially may as well not be a thing. And I think it's the same for many people, but at least I have Blackrock Foundry, and I think it really sucks for the people who in past expansions enjoyed a lot of that non-raid, non-PvP content, because I don't think they're being very well supported in this expansion. And as much as many people will say, well, you know what, go get your transmogs, that's old content. A patch should be adding new content. It should be giving you new reasons to log on, instead of just leaving you with the same previous reasons you had to log on. So that's essentially my current word on Warlords of Draenor. You know, great start, I think. As I said in the beta, it was going to review very highly. It's going to be extremely engaging for the first 2 months, but then the only thing there will be is raiding, because a lot of the core content, unfortunately, just didn't get the time and attention it needed in development, and that essentially is what seems to have panned out. Now, with that covered, it's time to talk about past expansions and the various forms of pretty cool stuff that was going on. Now, let's start off with the Burning Crusade. Now, I only hit level 70 like 6 months before TBC was actually over and Wrath came out, so take all this stuff with a bit of a grain of salt, plus it was a very long time ago. I enjoyed the hell out of the Isle of Keltanas. When I first hit 70, I think that was a new thing, and I was at that stage where anything endgame was completely new and shiny and special and cool, so that kept me busy. I know they're probably not the most interesting dailies ever, and once they were all unlocked, it was really a case of just doing the same thing day in, day out all the time. So yes, that was a bit of a pity, but I thought Magister's Terrace was pretty cool, and from the times that I've hopped back into the Sunwell, it seems like it was a pretty fun raid. In terms of the other raids in that expansion, everything that I've heard has been pretty positive, apart from Mount Hyjal because of that wave system, which I think drives everyone absolutely up the wall, but that's fine. I don't really think there's a great deal of sense about me talking about too much of the Burning Crusade stuff. Though the one thing I will talk about, because I did it more recently, I did it during Wrath, was Netherwing. I thought Netherwing was really a very awesome thing. That was a reputation that could be ground a little bit. It also had some cool dailies, especially some ones with decently innovative mechanics that didn't throw you in with a million extra hotkeys and things like that. For an example, the racing. I thought that stuff was pretty nifty. And it also had some pretty cool story. It was one of the few times we actually got to see Illidan himself. So yes, Netherwing, really awesome, and in general, I think a very solid expansion. Wow, I mean, the numbers do say that that was a very good expansion, so I think we'll just leave it at that and head on to Wrath of the Lich King, which was my personal favorite expansion. Now, the whole point of this video was, why do I continue playing WoW? And the reason why I'm looking back is to analyze what drove me to play back then. So I think Wrath of the Lich King is probably one of the better examples, because it's, I think, when I had a lot of free time and also played a lot of World of Warcraft. It's just a good thing to talk about. So, first of all, the leveling. I thought that the pacing of the leveling was, at that stage, or at that the time, whatever, I think very good. You could speed level through it extremely quickly, or I think just for the regular questing and stuff like that, it was decently paced out. It was definitely slower than, I think, any of the subsequent expansions, but that was fine. It was a different stage of the game, and playing that content, I think, to me anyway, sort of fulfilled the single-player RPG itch. You had loads of zones that were really diverse, with an aesthetic that really did appeal to me a lot, personally. I like snowy stuff, I like northern stuff, so that worked, but also I think the storylines are really cool. It had one of the strongest backings in terms of the lore, which obviously is a very important thing with an expansion. I think it had good villains, and I like the way that, even though every zone did feel pretty different, there was the same core stories which were carrying you from zone to zone. You had the undead, you had the stuff going on with Ulduar, and then each zone sort of had its own flair. Also things like, say, the Tuskar, I thought they were really cool as well. So, a very strong leveling experience in my opinion. In terms of other things in Wrath, I think it also had some very good dungeons. Now, I know this is a bit of a point of contention, because this is, we didn't have Burning Crusade heroics. Now, I didn't do Burning Crusade heroics, so I can't really comment on that. All I can say is, I thought that at the appropriate gear level, the Wrath of the Lich King heroics were for the most part pretty fun. The difficulty was kind of inconsistent. There were some of them where they were definitely a good bit harder than others. I think was it Halls of Lightning that had the hard end boss? It was one of the Ulduar ones anyway. But I did have a lot of fun gearing up through that as a completely noobish warrior tank. But eventually I did get my shit together, and I was able to tank okay and not get everyone killed, so yay, I suppose that was fun. Now, another thing, of course, is that the pace of gearing was a good bit slower back then. I was okay with that. Every bit of gear felt special, and I think it was far more rewarding. Right now, gear is very... it's almost, I think, catered to extremely short attention spans. It's all instant gratification. You click on a token, you get gear, you get it from so many different ways so quickly these days that I think it does undermine the whole idea of a bit of loot being a really epic, cool thing. So back then, I think loot was a bit cooler. Now, of course, Wrath was the expansion where they did start to increase the rate at which players got loot. I think that Wrath in general had a pretty good balance, though, in terms of what I did enjoy. Now, also, epic mounts were still, obviously they did come in the Burning Crusade, but for many nooblets like me, we didn't have them, and it was still pretty tricky to get gold if you weren't a skilled economist, so I did actually have a lot of fun earning that, and because it was such a big sort of lofty goal at the time, I think it was very rewarding when I finally did get that epic mount. Another thing that definitely drove me to play from day to day was Wintergrasp. Wintergrasp was awesome for just so many reasons. First of all, sieges are cool. We've all seen Lord of the Rings, we've all seen many, movies, heard of cool stories and tales in history. Sieges are cool. I think that's just a thing that a lot of people like. So that was one nice thing about Wintergrasp. I think it was decently implemented. It could have been better, and they could have certainly dealt with balancing and things like that in a little bit of a better way, especially in regards to the tenacity buff and all that stuff. Pretty hard to solve, but fundamentally, I think it was really cool. Another great thing was that it was this 2-hour event that brought the whole server together. That really did foster a sense of server-wide community, which was, well, obviously that's not a thing anymore these days, but back then, I think that was really cool. And also, as a pretty much solely PvE player, it made me care about PvP, but it also allowed for stuff that wasn't raw PvP, so I could hop in a vehicle if I didn't feel like fighting other players, and I could still help. that was a really cool part of that design as well. It really did offer something for everyone, and of course, because I was a PvE player, I wanted to get into Vault of Archivon. There was a real reason why you would care for winning, and that, you know, you'd see that Wintergrass was about to pop, and you think, you know what, I won't log off, I'll go do Wintergrass, but that'll be fun. And for the most part, it was. Of course, Vault, I think, was also just a great design. It was a really nice way to dip your toes into what a raid boss was like, and I think for a lot of people, it definitely did serve as a very solid introduction to raiding in World of Warcraft. I suppose while I'm talking about raiding, as did Naxxramas. I mean, it wasn't particularly hard. I didn't actually progress that much in it, though. I ended up, I think, quitting for a few months, then Ulduar came out, and I just quit because I was very busy in real life with, I think it was GCSEs, I'm not sure. Yeah, timelines are confusing. Anyway, Ulduar came out next. It's widely considered to be one of the best raids the Blizzard have ever made, so look, there's no point going over Ulduar's reputation. Everyone sort of knows what the general consensus of it is. Let's just move on to other things. So we've got the Argent Tournament stuff. Now, the actual Argent Tournament raid, I think, was great from a casual perspective, but really, it should have been the high mole to something else, and they should have came out, I think, quite close together, if you know what I mean, as a part of the same tier. There wasn't enough content there, and for a sort of bleeding edge progression guild, there was so much repetition of content that was just very problematic. So yes, that stuff did suck, but you know what? Getting a new dungeon was also pretty cool. I liked that. And the actual dailies themselves, I think, were interesting. I mechanically did not mind them. I thought they were pretty cool. Some people really hate the mounted stuff. I kind of worked it out, like just how to win every time, pretty early, so I thought it was fun enough, really. The problem was that it was, like, stuff was gated behind stuff, which was gated behind more stuff, which was gated behind even more stuff, which meant that you would have to be doing those dailies religiously for, like, I don't know, months. That was just poorly designed. I mean, if you make a fun set of quests and then tell people to do them for 4 months straight, it does not matter how fun the quests are, they will get sick of them. So I think Argent Tournament, if they had have balanced those rewards better, would have been more fondly remembered by a lot of people in terms of the dailies. Aesthetically though, it was one of my favourite patches. I really, really liked the music, the look, the feel, all that stuff was great, and how it was set in the most sort of dark and oppressing zone in the game at that stage, or at least one of them. It was set there, yet it sort of had this very different feel. It was like this little beacon of hope or whatever. I thought that was really cool from a immersion perspective as well. So hopping on from that, we've got ICC. That was a hell of a patch. 3 really, really good dungeons. Actually, I thought they were a lot of fun. They were also pretty challenging. That, I think, I know that at that time it definitely got me trying a bit harder in some things. And also, it's probably worth saying that while I did kind of do casually Trial of the Crusader, when I started property raiding was definitely ICC. I rated it a lot then, both in 10 and 25. Our guild did 10s, but then we kind of did it as like a guild pugged 25 in a way. So I had a lot of fun with that. I ended up on our A team. At that stage, the guild I think was a bit bigger, and there was an A team and a B team. And I think I started off in the B team, but I ended up on the A team, which was kind of fun. Now, of course, my guild is just raiding with one team, and I think that's a far better solution for the kind of guild that we are. But I had a lot of fun then. I thought that many of the fights were just extremely enjoyable. I liked the way that, for an example, yeah, you had Loot Ship, you had Sourfang, you had Marigar, you had some bosses that were, once you kind of grokked them, they were just a bit of a loot bag that was fun, and I thought that stuff was good. But then you got to the really tricky End of Wing bosses, so really I did have a lot of enjoyment with ICC as a raid. Now, another thing to talk about is some of the daily content of Wrath of the Lich King, so that's maybe the Venture Co., the Sons of Hodir, and various things like that. One of the things that was nice is that, also like the Frenzy Heart and the other dudes, a lot of them felt optional. Of course, the ones that had shoulder enchants didn't, but at least they were bound to an account in a future patch of Wrath, so that was good. But what I did like about them is they made you go out in the world, right? With the Warlords of Draenor dailies, I think one thing that definitely takes a lot of, as I covered earlier, that takes a lot of the kind of drive away from it for me and doesn't really make me feel enthused about them is, it's very much, you know, it gives you one spot to grind mobs in the world per day, then you hop back and that's it. There's not that much context to it. Whereas in Wrath of the Lich King, you had a few decent little stories going on there, whatever, but also, you really did go on a journey of, I think, one of the better realized continents in World of Warcraft, so there's a bit more variety there, and because I think some of them, were not completely mandatory, that was good. Or at least, once you got to Revered, and then the stuff was BOA, that actually mattered, then you could chill out a bit, which was, I think, a pretty good way of doing things, actually. So I think, really, Wrath of the Lich King had great raids for the most part. It had really good dailies. I enjoyed the Argent Tournament quite a bit. And yeah, a very strong expansion. There was just many different reasons for me to continue playing, and a lot of stuff that drove me. I think in my opinion, better pacing of gearing helped. There was very solid raids, and just the general world and I think content was of a very high quality. Certainly, I think it was higher quality than what we maybe get now with some things. For an example, a rep being, oh, just go grind some mobs, no variety. Oh, it's a bit of a pity, isn't it? Right, let's move on to Cataclysm. So, with Cataclysm, I did enjoy the leveling like the first 1 or 2 times, but it did get hyperlinear after that, and that was really a bit of a pain in the ass, honestly. Plus, I also think it did a pretty terrible job of communicating Deathwing as the big bad enemy. It wasn't as good as, say, with Arthas. I know some people say that Arthas popped up too much, but some people said it was kind of comic bookish. Have you actually read World of Warcraft lore? It's basically a comic book. I mean, there is not much about WoW lore that is super high and mighty, and Blizzard are very clear about that. Okay, maybe they've sort of branched into more ambitious things with Warlords, but a lot of the people say, yeah, when we were kids, we loved comic books, we loved stuff like that, and that's kind of what we try to, that's the same sort of passion we try to fuel into our game. I think that really came through with the leveling experience of Wrath. But in Cataclysm, I think, aesthetically, some of the stuff got a bit tiring with your enemies. It was the same damn cultists all the time, and that elemental aesthetic maybe didn't do as much for me as some of the more northern, Nordic feels of Wrath. But still, the whatever. Questing was okay. Let's move on, though, to what I think was really, really fun at the start, and that was doing those properly hard heroic dungeons with a guild. That was great. And also, there was a good bit of gear progression because you would start off doing normal dungeons, then you'd advance to the heroic dungeons, and then you get into the raids. I thought that was good. Plus, of course, as I said, the difficulty was great. The only problem is, it wasn't really puggable, and I suppose they could do puggable difficulty like that right now in the form of, say, a mythic dungeon, and just put a gold proving ground requirement on it, or something like that. I think that would be a good bit of content that a lot of people would enjoy. Now, in terms of the actual raids, I think one issue that did suck is that the 10-player difficulty of Wrath of the Lich King was then brought up to the difficulty of Wrath of the Lich King 25s. This meant that a lot of 10-player guilds kind of were without a difficulty level that suited them. It's unfortunate, very unfortunate that Blizzard then thought that LFR was the solution to that. It wasn't, as we, found out, but thankfully Flex was added, so that stuff's okay. But the raids themselves, I did enjoy for the most part when I did them. The first few. I did not really, I didn't raid Firelands and Dragon's Soul. I know my guild did. They, I think, got like 4 or 5 bosses into Dragon's Soul in the first night because it was such a feckin' cakewalk. Bit unfortunate. I have done those things, since, obviously. But yeah, I think with Cataclysm, there was just less that really inspired me to play. I didn't find the overworld stuff as interesting. I did not like how it wasn't just like one cool continent that just felt like one big whole thing. It was all scattered around the place. Didn't like that as much. Also, I think another thing that really didn't compare favorably for me was Tol Barad. I just thought it was really crap. It was basically just the factions running around in circles, sometimes win trading, and just various really shitty things like that. It was just a really poorly designed thing, and it was such a regression from, I think, often the grandeur of Wintergrasp. It was a pretty epic thing as far as bits of, daily, or not daily, like bits of world content that are kind of regular are in World of Warcraft. It's hard to get a bit more epic than Wintergrasp. We had siege engines everywhere, you had loads of players, pretty cool. Tol Barad, not so much, and I think Blizzard have definitely learnt the wrong lesson. It was definitely something that brought the community, together a lot within servers, but also it inspired, I think, a lot of PvE people because, well, obviously they got a raid out of it and they got some extra dailies. That stuff was pretty cool, and it would be okay to have that these days, I'd say, as long as it's a well-designed battleground that does more than just sort of support raw capture the flag PvP. I mean, as I said earlier, if you're a PvE player, that's fine. You could hop in a vehicle, or you could rank up by killing the Horde NPCs, or the Alliance NPCs. If you are the Horde, you didn't really have to engage in a crazy amount of PvP, yet you could still help the battle out. So overall, I think Wintergrasp was great. Tol Barad did not compare favorably at all. and that is really unfortunate. That was sort of one of the main reasons or things that I enjoyed in Wrath was just kind of disappeared. But really that's most of Cataclysm covered. I don't want to dwell on it too much. Mist of Pandaria, though, was a pretty interesting expansion as far as I'm concerned. If we start off the leveling experience, it's actually my least favorite yet, and even at the time it was my least favorite. Yeah, a little bit of a pity, but once I actually hit max level, I was at that stage where I hadn't played WoW that much for a few months, so I was able to just sink my teeth into the dailies, and I was probably driven slightly insane by the Golden Lotus, I will admit. That sucked. But some of the dailies themselves, I didn't really mind that much, but yeah, bad system, you know, many different problems, and they should have held off in 5.1 because the last thing we needed was more dailies. So all that a little bit problematic. What I did initially enjoy though was, you know, gearing up, getting into Mogushan Vaults, which I thought was a really fun raid. I really hated Heart of Fear because, I don't know, aesthetic reasons, and I just didn't like some of the fights. But Terrace of the Eternal Springs is pretty cool. Then if you hop on to patch 5.1, of course you have the cool story and all that stuff. I did not enjoy those dailies one bit, I'll be honest, but there is still a story there to be had, and I thought that was nifty. 5.2, I thought was pretty cool. Those story quests were decent as far as things go. The dailies got quite old pretty fast for me, I think, but I did like the way you had the treasures scattered throughout the island, so hunting for that was pretty cool. One thing that definitely drove me to play was, for an example, getting the keys to the Palace of Lei Shen to do that really fun treasure finding event. I think that was one of the cooler things there. That was really nice. And then also, it was a fantastic raid, Throne of Thunder. I had a lot of fun during it. Plus, it's when I started up my YouTube channel, so things did get a lot more busy, and obviously, if you are doing World of Warcraft in a sort of YouTube capacity, especially doing daily content, then yeah, you're definitely going to find more things that drive you to play the game, because it's, well, back then it wasn't a job, but it was something that I just did because I didn't have anything else to do. I was bored, so whatever, that's what I did. Now, 5.3, a pretty contentious patch, actually. I know a lot of people don't like it. I thought it had some really cool ideas, and I just wish they would take the concept further. For an example, imagine if Tanan Jungle, as well as having structured content, had essentially a dynamic war that had loads of rare spawn NPCs, had rare spawn, like, sort of patrols of enemies, like large patrols of enemies, as if it was a war zone, and they could use a lot of the tech that is there from patch 5.3 with, you know, events popping up in your map like it was an active battlefield. But instead of 5.3 where there's only a few objectives, no, go absolutely ham, have all the objectives, all the things. That would be really, really nice. So 5.3 had cool ideas, it didn't take them far enough, and it did not have enough cool structured content really to keep people interested. And honestly, on the Alliance side, those story quests were absolutely pathetic. But at the time, I was still playing quite a bit of Throne of Thunder, so I was kind of happy about that. Though, I will say, the last 2 months of the Throne of Thunder tier did get old for me, absolutely. But at that stage, I was able to hop on to the PTR for patch 5.4, so I was able to keep myself busy doing that. Now, as for patch 5.4, well, I think 5.4 did a good job in many regards, but it was not a patch that had enough content to justify it lasting for 14 months. I don't think any patch can justify lasting 14 months. Siege of Orgrimmar was a really good raid. I think one of the things that really hurt it, though, was just how stupidly linear it was. That sucked, honestly, and yeah, it just sucked, especially after your maybe, I don't know, 3rd month of raiding it, and you're spending half your night doing the same bosses that you know you can beat. I think the Blackrock Foundry actually improves on that quite a lot, because Blackrock has got a really nice winged structure which allows for a lot of freedom. I'm really happy that Blizzard decided to go in that direction. So yeah, Siege of Orgrimmar though, lots of fun fights in my opinion, but the structure kind of sucked. As for the Time of the Isle, a little bit too freeform. I mean, I like those elements, but give us a bit of a story, you know, something just to sink our teeth into, I suppose. Though the Time of the Isle itself, I think, was good to last for the 5 months or whatever that it, or 6 that, you know, a patch would usually last for. The problem, of course, was that big lull in content. 5.4 would not be an infamous patch if it wasn't for that duration, because I think the content itself was actually decent enough. So if it was maybe 6 months of 5.4, bearing in mind that for many of those 6 months we're pretty hyped about Warlords, we're finding out more information, and then, you know, the pre-patch comes out, and then boom, 7 months, maybe, 7 months after 5.4 comes out, we have a new expansion. That would have been a very good experience, and it's unfortunate that that didn't happen. So, I think that's really the whole retrospective done, and I think that's definitely uncovered the reasons why I used to play the game a lot in the past. I think what we've lost now in Warlords is having truly interesting content outside of raids and PvP. I'm not going to comment too much on Ashram because it's just not I don't enjoy it that much. I'll say that for a fact. I enjoy it far less than Wintergrasp. But, I mean, I'm not really a PvPer. It's not really my content, if you know what I mean. So, whatever, that's fine. But I think that the biggest loss has been, the outdoor world content is just not as good. There's less cool stories going on. The Garrison campaign, I think, had a handful of cool missions, but many of them were just, they were just phoned in, very lazy. That was very sad to see, actually. So yeah, that was a bit of a pity. The reps, which is something that I would generally have derived quite a bit of gameplay from in Wrath of the Lich King, they are no longer a thing, which is unfortunate, and there's no, optional reps. For an example, like the Q&I, Sporagar, Netherwing, etc. Actually, I'd like the Cloud Serpent people as well in MoB, because they weren't the thing that you felt like you needed to do. You just could if you wanted. Though, honestly, for raid mounts, you should have just been able to mount them anyway without the skill, but whatever. My basic point is, yeah, reps are one thing that, if done right, I think can be enjoyable, can be compelling on a sort of, do it if you want it scale. Like, for an example, if there was a really cool story behind the Shatari defense, which, by the way, there totally could be. Come on, the defense of Shatrath City. How badass could they make that plotline and that story? No, it's a mob grind. It's got a really cool mount. I could not be bothered getting it, though, because I'm not going to spend hours just grinding my face off mobs. No. I mean, if you want to do that, fine, but there should be other ways to get rep as well. So yeah, the reps definitely lost quite a bit for me. Also, I think that the super fast pace of gearing in comparison to past expansions has just, I think, degraded the enjoyment of the gearing experience. But I suppose for me, I'm having a lot of fun in Blackrock Foundry, I'm progressing with my guild, I think a lot of the fights are very fun, and I will definitely be tided over until patch 6.2 by that content. So, really, the reason why I think I'm a bit miffed about patch 6.1 is honestly just that I feel like for a lot of players who maybe are not so much into the raiding or the hardcore PvP, you're not getting that many extra reasons to play when you log in. I always like the idea of, if there's a new patch or something, it should give you an extra reason to log in every day and do something that's cool and exciting. I don't think those daily quests that they've added are very good, because only 2 of them are actually new content, the others are just rehashes of old content and a fixed professions, so not fun. Honestly, that's the reason why I'm a bit miffed about 6.1. I'll still have a game to play, I'll still be subscribed, but if Blackrock Foundry is not something that you really care about, I don't see, tying back to the title of this video and the whole purpose, I don't see much of a reason to continue playing until patch 6.2 comes out. So I suppose that's overall my thoughts on that. This is, I guess if you want to classify this as a Q&A, this has probably been the longest ever, but it's fun having a bit of a chat about old stuff and having a bit of a retrospective. So in closing, basically, what drove you to play the game in prior expansions? What was the stuff that really got you excited and made you want to log in every day? Was it raiding? Was it doing some of the maybe tougher dungeons? Just whatever. What was it? Let me know. I will definitely be paying a keen eye to the comments of this video, because I think this is a very interesting topic that was left in my previous video. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm not going to waste your time anymore. Thank you very much for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.